Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Josh.
Tanya's back.
Woo!
I'm back. And I'm badder than ever.
In the bougie way.
Bad and bougie. Bad and bougie.
So anyway,
Yeah.
obviously with Tanya back.
Yeah,
it's
so I
Tanya's
took
turn.
a little hiatus, guys.
It was a sabbatical.
It was a sabbatical. It was needed. But I'm back.
So yes, and it's your case.
It's my case.
This week.
It's my turn.
So yeah. What are you covering, bitch? She's like, I'm taking another sabbatical, cunt.
Yeah. If you would have waited 2.5 seconds, I would have dived straight into it.
Well, patience. No, just no, because you've been telling me. I know the name. I can't remember the name of the case, but I know that you've been telling me about this case, like,
With
not
like
about it, but like the name
no,
of the case.
over a month.
With over
a month.
So I'm like, that's the impatience, bitch. What's the case?
So,
sorry for all of you earphone wearers right there.
we're in a new studio because I got a new car.
Beep beep.
So the microphone is a little bit further away from us than usual.
Yeah, look at those sound waves from the laughing and stuff a while ago.
We did not
It's a good job. It's further away.
We did not do a sound test.
Oh, look at him.
What, the spider?
No, the cat.
There's a cat. Oh, he looks rough. He's He's back from a night out.
Oh.
Night out in the town.
Cannot relate.
Same. I was sat at home doing research last night. Anyway. So, the topic of today's Twisted Talk is the kidnapping of Shasta Groene by Joseph Edward Duncan III. Now, at some point...
That's a name.
Yeah,
not the Shasta Groene. I actually like that, but I mean the length of the other name.
Yeah. Now, at some point, I probably will refer to him as Joseph James Duncan. I do not know why.
Wait, say the full
Joseph
proper?
Edward Duncan.
Edward.
Yeah. Now there
good old
is...
Eddie.
Yeah, good old Eddie boy. So there is a trigger warning for sexual offences and violence against minors, as well as general violence, murder, the usual. But before we get into Shasta's case, we first need to discuss another case. Now this will be fairly brief, but let's just get into it now. So in 1996, 11-year-old Sammiejo White and her 9-year-old half-sister Carmen Cubias, I think I'm saying that correctly, lived in room 16 of the Crest Motel on Aurora Avenue North in Seattle, Washington.
Do. Sorry, Grace, not me, didn't you?
Yeah, very that.
I didn't really do it well, but you got the vibe.
Mm-hmm. So the two girls had 7 other siblings.
Oh my god.
Big family. Some of whom lived with them and their mother, Margaret Delaney, at the motel. Now, according to the Seattle Times, the children lived a rootless existence and moved often, which made it difficult for them to form friendships, put down roots, and go to school regularly.
Rootless as in R-O-T, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, why
are they ruthless?
Yeah.
You know I pronounce my THs. Their fathers, Sam White and Lionel Cubias, had a hard time keeping track of their daughters due to Margaret moving from motel to motel.
Okay.
On July 6th, 1996, I have 1994 written down for some reason, but it is 1996.
Yeah.
The two girls left the motel at around 10:30 p.m. at night. They had been left in the care of their 16-year-old brother, and they went to beg for food at a place called Taco Time that was down the street.
That's sad.
Mm-hmm. Very sad.
Poor guys.
They were also planning to try bumming for fags/cigarettes for their brother. And when Margaret got back to the motel, the girls were gone. And 3 hours later, she reported this to the police. Now, I'm not sure what time Margaret would have returned to the hotel. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but we just know that there was a 3-hour period between getting back and I suppose maybe having a look around herself before and then, assuming the worst.
Yeah. So I would assume that maybe it was quite common for the girls to, walk to the shop and things by themselves.
Yeah. And if they were doing begging now and then, maybe she thought that's what they were doing, but if they were doing that, they probably wouldn't have been too far, and then when she couldn't find them...
Like, I will say, there wasn't much information out there on this case, but just because it is linked
to your main...
I felt it was important to mention it.
Yeah, similar story with me soon.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's a case that Margaret was out working, if she was gone doing errands, or what the story was, but moral of the story, the girls were left in the care of their teenage brother. So she reported it to the police. Unfortunately, there was not much that the police could do. In their eyes, it was something that happened all too frequently. Youths leaving home without telling their parents and running away. Now, I would like to point out that we're talking about an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. So even if the police believed that they had run away, these are literal children. They could not have gone far. They had no money. They were begging for food. it's not as if they could have hopped on a bus and ended up in fucking Utah or somewhere.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, and this was in Seattle, you said, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, in my opinion, the police definitely could have done more.
Oh, of course, but sure, we see that so much in cases,
again,
especially older cases.
I'm not trying to generalise, I'm not trying to call out racism when it's not there, but I would like to make it known that Sammiejo had Native American ancestry, and I think now it is more in Canada that I've heard these stories come out recently about how many Indigenous women and children are missing in Canada, and very little to nothing is being done about it.
As far as I know, I think it's the same in North America as well.
Yeah. So family members were staunchly against this theory of the two girls running away, stating that they would have absolutely called home, they wouldn't have wanted to worry their mother, they would have wanted to let her know that they were safe.
Yeah.
Now, I honestly couldn't find very much on this case, which is just fucking tragic. So I don't have any information on whether there was an investigation into the girl's disappearance or not, but I would guess there wasn't much of one. On February 10th, 1998, so 2 years later, the remains of Sammiejo and Carmen were found in a field in the North Creek area of a place called, it's either Bothell or Bothell. They were found by a homeless person who had been living in a nearby barn, and he spotted a skull.
Is that still in the same state?
I actually didn't look into that, but I would assume so.
I'll check. Is it Bothel?
Bothell.
Double L, okay. Yeah, it's in Washington State.
Yeah, so still in Washington. Now, according to the King County's Medical Examiner's Office, both girls were killed by homicidal violence very soon after they went missing. On February 22nd, 1998, a service was held for the girls at Our Lady of Mount Virgin Church in Seattle.
It's awful as well, because obviously if they were able to determine that, it was not long after they went missing that they were
killed,
murdered, like it's like, it was, 1998, so roughly 2 years, give or take, depending what months.
Yeah.
And like to find out that whole time where you were possibly hoping they were still out there somewhere, they were probably dead since that same night, if not the next day.
Yeah. Like, it's horrible, really. So...
And it's infuriating. In terms of
absolutely,
no investigation
absolutely,
done. That, well, not for definite, but that we know of, going by how lackadaisy and how they were like, they probably just ran off,
Yeah. So the service was held for the girls at Our Lady of Mount Virgin Church in Seattle's Rainier Valley. Sammiejo's father, Sam White, was a member of the Gros Ventre tribe in North Dakota, and the service was marked by songs and traditional Native American prayers. Now, that's what I have on Sammiejo and Carmen, and obviously we know who was responsible for this.
Yeah.
So let's get some background information on the fucker.
Yeah, go on to the main one and just bear in mind that he was...
Yeah. So Joseph Edward Duncan III was the fourth of 5 children born to Joseph Edward Duncan Jr., who I will be referring to as Joseph Jr., and Lillian May Duncan. He was born on February 25th,
so 1963. Joseph Jr. is the dad?
Yeah, so okay. I would imagine...
Duncan III is the son.
Duncan III is the son, Joseph Edward Jr. is his dad, and then Joseph Edward I would have been the granddad / the dad's dad. So Duncan III was born on February 25th, 1963. His father was in the army, and as a result, the family moved around a lot. According to the Spokesman Review, they would move every 2 years until Duncan was 12 years old. Shut up! Nobody asked your opinion.
She's talking to crows. I don't know if the microphone's picking them up, but just in case they're not.
They're just on the roof screaming at us. So as a result, the family moved around a lot. According to the Spokesman Review, they would have moved every 2 years until Duncan was around 12 years old. They lived all around the US, as well as some parts of Europe, and doctors would later say that because of this, Duncan would keep to himself a lot and formed, quote, only a few superficial acquaintances.
Oh yeah, I suppose when you know you're going to leave again, what's the point in making close friends that you're going to lose?
Not great social skills.
No.
So in 1978, Duncan's father retired from the military and began working with the US Postal Service in a Tacoma area bulk mail centre. And a year later, in 1979, Duncan Sr. and his wife separated, stating that their marriage was, quote, irretrievably broken with no specified reason.
Duncan Sr. is...
The dad.
The dad, yeah.
So Duncan III, the scumbag, his parents separated in 1979. Now, Duncan III, the scumbag, Attended Lakes High School in Tacoma until his sophomore year, which would be, what is it, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. So I think it would have been his second year of high school. Because I think it goes freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior.
Also referred to, that would be 10th grade.
Yeah, so he would have been...
Second year of high school.
Yeah.
Usually aged 15 to 16.
Yeah. Which would be when his life went downhill. So, at which point he dropped out after Christmas break with a 1.7 grade average out of a possible 4.0. At this point in his life, he was smoking weed on a daily basis, and by the time he had reached high school, he claims to have tried LSD, amphetamines, barbiturates, Valium, and PCP. Now, Duncan had several run-ins with the law in his teen years. At the age of 15, he tried to outrun police in a car he had stolen and tried to run over a police officer.
Oh,
and
okay.
for this offence, he was sent to the Tacoma area Dycelands Boys Ranch for several months. At age 16, he told doctors that he had raped 13 young boys and claimed in one case that he had tied up 6 boys.
By what age?
By the age of 16. And in one case, he claims to have tied up 6 boys, ranging in age from 6 years old to 10 years old, and says that he forced them to perform oral sex before sodomizing them. Shortly before his 17th birthday, Duncan was arrested after he broke into a neighbour's house. He knew that the neighbour would be away. He stole 4 pistols, about 1,000 rounds of ammo, and some pornographic magazines. He said he had intended to take his loot, go home and masturbate. But, quote, "Then I decided, why not the real thing? So I got a gun and went cruising for a victim." He found a 14-year-old boy in front of a nearby school and forced him into the woods at gunpoint, before making him perform oral sex on him twice, hitting him repeatedly with a stick, and burning his buttocks with a cigarette. By the time Duncan made it home, the police were waiting for him, and this is the first time that he was charged with a sex crime. Around this time, he was assessed by doctors at the Western State Hospital near Tacoma, and told them that he had a detailed sexual history starting at the age of 8, when he alleges to have performed incestuous acts with female relatives. He says that at the age of 12, he had forced a 5-year-old boy to perform oral sex on him.
Oh dear God.
And that he had done the same thing to a 9-year-old boy at gunpoint when he was 15 years old. Like, he's just a very messed up individual. Doctors found Duncan to be preoccupied with, quote, deviant sexual fantasies, and said that he, quote, meets the definition of the sexual psychopath. And this was when he was 17 years old.
17 years old was
17.
The first arrest.
First
charge,
official
kind of
known offence of sex crime. So Duncan pled guilty to first-degree rape for the rape of the 14-year-old boy, and was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years in prison, but this was suspended. And in lieu of prison, he was committed to sex offender treatment at Western State Hospital. By 1982, doctors had given up on him, saying, quote, "After 22 months in the programme, Mr. Duncan has shown an unwillingness to modify his sexually deviant behaviours and has chosen not to commit himself to programme techniques." According to them, he showed, quote, "a constant need to maintain secrecy about his fantasies," and they also said that he rebelled against his treatments. On Valentine's Day 1982, Duncan's mother visited him, and he was allowed to stay with her at a cottage on the grounds of the hospital that was used for visits like this.
Okay.
And after Lillian, his mother, went to bed, Duncan grabbed his coat, gloves and an extension cord before jumping the hospital wall and creeping to nearby houses, where he spied on an 18-year-old woman and some of the people in the other houses. Dogs began barking, which led to a man seeing him, so Duncan fled back to the cottage, where he woke up his mother, and according to the spokesperson review, she then taught him how to disco dance.
So obviously he came back acting like he hadn't snuck out.
You can
My God, that's something.
Having the time of your life. Ooh, see that
creep.
girl. Watch that scene.
That's
Dig it,
so
Duncan
strange.
the dancing queen.
No.
I do not.
But I'm like, I don't
apologise
even
for my voice.
understand. How is there not, like, on that kind of facility, how was there not, like...
security or something.
Yeah.
How was he, like, I know it's the 80s, but how was he able to just
hop the wall?
scale the wall and be like, I'm going to go spy. I'm going to bring an extension
Like,
cord.
especially when it's a place that he's in instead of prison. He's obviously not the only one that's
Like,
there instead
it would
of prison.
obviously be like a lower security level than a prison. But
yeah,
like, you
but
would
like I
imagine
wouldn't see someone even in
it's
a
a
minimum
sex-
security
it's-
prison managing to hop a wall and
it's
run
a
off.
sex offender hospital.
Yeah.
You gotta keep the sex
Especially
offenders
if there
in.
is, like he went off to nearby houses.
Yeah. And spied on people. And like I have no doubt in my mind that he probably would have murdered someone that night if not for the fact that someone saw him and he got spooked.
Yeah, and the dog's barking and...
Yeah. So... 1 week after this, Duncan announced that he would rather leave treatment and serve his time in prison. Therapists wrote to Pierce County officials, and this is a direct quote, "He exhibited little remorse or guilt for his sexual deviation while in treatment. He is," and the word not is stressed, "he is not safe to be at large. Mr. Duncan is available for transport back to your county by your sheriff at your earliest convenience." So then in 1982, Duncan was sentenced to at least 3 years and no more than 20 years in prison. He served 14 years for the rape and 3 more years for parole violations, leading to a total of 17 years in prison. After his release, he is accused of molesting one boy and attempting to molest another. Why what?
Released when? Wait, what?
So he would have been released in, I think it was around 2003, 2004.
After doing time in the prison, because he did go back.
He did go back to prison.
Yeah.
Now I know I have it somewhere
Well,
in
not
my
go back
research.
because I suppose he wasn't there, but
he
put
went.
into...
He would rather be in prison. Basically, is what he said. Now I have it somewhere else in my research. The specifics regarding that boy that he molested. Well, not specifics, but it's mentioned.
Yeah, but like...
Yeah, so he basically spent most of his adult life in prison. So he would have been, we'll say, 19 when he moved to the prison, served 17 years, so he would have been 36 years old when he was released.
Yeah.
So now getting into the kidnapping of Shasta Groene. On May 15th, 2005, 8-year-old Shasta Groene thought she saw someone in the closet of her bedroom in Wolf Lodge, Idaho. Feeling scared, as any 8-year-old would, and to be honest, I'd be fairly fucking freaked out myself.
I remember one day, and I was actually like legit, like not 8. I was legit probably like 12, 13, 14. It was living in Stag, whatever age I was. And I remember on my wardrobe in my room, there was a jacket hanging up.
Oh my god.
And the door was, I had the door open a bit, which is weird for me because normally I make sure it's closing because I'm that kind of, it freaks me out. And yeah, no, I woke up and do you know when you're half asleep and you look and I nearly shit myself because I thought there was someone standing in front of my wardrobe staring at me.
It's freaky. Like, my bedroom door does not close.
Actually,
It still hasn't been fixed. It just does not close.
No.
And I hang like my hoodie off the door. I don't actually
And the hoodie
know.
is thick.
And there's been a few times where I've woken up and I've looked at the door and I'm like, ah!
Yeah.
But then, like, obviously the dog is in the bed with me and I'm like, nah, she'd spook. If there was someone here, she'd keep me safe.
Yeah, you'd wake, she'd cause a ruckus.
Yeah. So, Shasta went and got her 9-year-old brother Dylan and asked him to sleep in the bed with her. A few hours later, their mother Brenda shook her awake, and Shasta recalls her mother crying and telling her that someone was in the house, and I believe her exact words...
Oh, the mother was the one freaking out that there was someone in the house at this point.
There was someone in the house.
Yeah, so probably did see someone in the...
someone was probably... he probably was hiding in the wardrobe. So I think from an interview, I think Shasta's exact words were that her mother woke her up and said, "There's someone in the house and he doesn't want us to be here."
That's very...
very weird.
Phrasing even.
So Shasta followed her mother to the living room. So living in the house at this time, so Shasta's parents, Steve and Brenda, had separated when Shasta was 2.
Okay.
They had 4
and
kids.
She's 8 now.
She's 8
well,
now.
not now, but in this.
Yeah. They had 4 kids together. No, 5 kids, sorry. They had 4 boys and Shasta.
Yeah.
So, what were the brothers called? Vance and... Sorry, let me just check. Jesse. So Jesse and Vance, I believe, were living with the father.
So there was 2 boys with the mother
father
and Shasta as
then
well.
Slade, who was 13, Dylan, who was 9, and Shasta, who was 8, were living with the mother and the mother's boyfriend, Mark Mackenzie.
Right.
So Shasta followed her mother to the living room where Mark Mackenzie, the boyfriend / stepfather, will say, as well as 13-year-old Slade, were both face down on the floor with their wrists and ankles bound with zip ties and their mouths duct taped. There was a man dressed all in black, holding a shotgun. In some sources I've seen that he had night vision goggles on, but I don't know how true that is. Initially, Shasta thought that it was a police officer because she's 8, but she quickly realised this was not the case.
Yeah.
So he had the shotgun and he told Brenda to get on the ground too. He then bound Shasta's hands and feet before carrying her out to the garden. Like, they lived in a very rural area. He carried her out and put her under a tree next to Dylan.
And Dylan's the 9-year-old.
The 9-year-old. He then returned to the family home and Shasta heard thumping and pained grunts. She says she didn't know what was going on at that time. Unfortunately, Duncan went back inside to murder Mark, Brenda and Slade. And he did this by brutally beating them with a hammer.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. This was...
He was a basher.
It was violent. It was violent. Now, the next day, a neighbour dropped by to pay one of the children $10 for cutting his lawn. And he noticed blood all over the door, so he immediately phoned 911.
Yeah.
When police entered the home at around 7 p.m, they found the bodies of Slade and Brenda Groene in the kitchen and the body of Mark Mackenzie in the living room. Now, according to Shasta, Slade had actually survived the initial beating with the hammer.
Right.
And he had followed Duncan out into the yard. And Shasta said he was sitting at the picnic table and then he just lit down.
Went to sleep permanently.
Yeah.
Obviously,
this is actually really sad. So Slade followed Duncan out of the house after being beaten, only for Duncan to beat him again. And before he died, it's believed that Slade found enough strength to pull himself back into the house to be with his mother. And that's why his body was found inside the house next to his mother's. Which I just thought that was so fucking heartbreaking. Now, until the autopsies were carried out...
And what age was he?
He was 13. He was only a baby himself. And until the autopsies were carried out, authorities had initially believed that the 3 victims had been shot in the head. By 11:15 that night, officers were asking for search warrants in order to conduct a detailed examination of the house, as well as a 1988 Ford pickup truck that was found on the neighbour's property. And the pickup truck had in it a fresh roll of duct tape and some wadded up duct tape in the back.
Well, there you go.
Which everyone was tied up and duct taped. The truck turned out to belong to Mark Mackenzie, and Shasta would later say that Duncan had used it to drive her and Dylan to where his Jeep was parked.
Right.
So I would assume he parked his Jeep on the neighbour's property, and that's why the truck
was
found.
Because like we said, rural area, so the neighbour's property could have been a couple of minutes down the road.
Yeah, it's like my house. So the officers would also be searching for additional bodies to confirm that Shasta and Dylan were missing, and the warrants were granted by a judge at 20 to 12 that night, 20 to midnight. The next day...
so only like fucking 4 and a bit hours after the discovery was made.
Yeah. So the next day the scene was examined by a forensic fingerprint examiner, a behavioural scientist, and a blood spatter pattern expert.
Because this was, what year did you say? This was early 2000s?
2005. More warrants were obtained to examine mail addressed to Steve Groene and mail addressed to Brenda Groene and Mark Mackenzie. This was because a plain brown parcel had been sent from Lake Placid, New York, with no address, just Steve Groene's name on it, and Coeur d'Alene. Sorry, I forgot to mention this all happened in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho.
Okay.
I said Idaho.
Area-wise.
I said Idaho. I think I forgot to say Coeur d'Alene. But Coeur d'Alene was misspelled on it, and investigators thought that this could possibly, potentially contain a ransom note. It didn't. I don't actually know what it was.
Yeah, because I suppose, I'm not trying to be funny, but I know obviously sometimes ransoms go to the police even if the family aren't around because the person just wants money.
Yeah.
But typically most of the times when you hear of ransoms, it goes to the parents. Now, yes, don't get me wrong, unless the parents are rich, it does normally, if a ransom is to be given into, it's normally the government or the FBI or someone who ends up paying it, or trying to entrap them with a payment.
Yeah.
But it's not so often you hear of a ransom note being sent when that person has already killed the parents, or the parent, the mother and the step parent, and a sibling.
Yeah, but I suppose they were just looking into all
possible routes.
avenues. You know, there was an actual investigation into
this one.
Now there was. So as I said, I don't actually know what that parcel was, but it wasn't.
It wasn't a ransom, as I heard.
It wasn't related to the case. They also wanted to examine a school letter sent to Brenda about Slade, with Detective Jerry Northrup saying, quote, "Perhaps there's something interesting from school that would be interesting to know about Slade's behaviour that might lead to might lend more information towards a motive." Don't understand the thought process there, but pop off, sis. All in all, detectives...
I guess that's part of the whole all avenues thing.
All in all, detectives would end up seizing close to 300 items as evidence.
From the house?
Yeah. From the house and, I suppose, the car and whatever else. Now, as we know, or as I'm fairly sure most of us know, a majority of the time in cases like this, it is someone close to the family or close to the children who is responsible.
Typically, yeah.
And so Shasta and Dylan's father was a suspect. He had admitted to arguing with Brenda just a few days before regarding the custody of the children, and had made a plea on the news that was found to be suspicious by police. He said, quote, "I'd like to address my children's abductor. Please release my children safely. They had nothing to do with this." Now, I would assume that it was the phrasing at the end, they had nothing to do with this, that made it seem to police like he might know something more or possibly be involved. So police gave him a polygraph test.
Which is not 100% reliable, but anyway.
Yeah. When they asked...
You can come up as lying just because you're nervous.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd fail to fuck because I'd be an anxious person.
Yeah, I have like...
It's like, you know, like even when like you're going through airport security, you're like, what if they find a bomb in my bag?
Yeah.
I didn't put a bomb in my fucking bag.
Yeah, or what if they find cocaine? I don't take cocaine.
Yeah. Oh my god, did I pack a gun? I don't own a gun.
I don't own a gun. I've never held a gun.
But you still think you're about to be fucking like detained by border control.
Now, I personally don't buy into polygraph tests because, in my opinion, if like me, you are an anxious human being, you're going to fail.
People are inclined to fail it even if they're telling the truth.
You're going to fail.
And easily also you've got people who have so much self-control they could have just murdered 7 people to take a polygraph test and pass.
Exactly.
Very
exact,
that, new slang.
Very that.
But like even like I'm pretty sure in terms of like, correct me if I'm wrong, but because this is just me saying this based off of TV shows. Well, I said correct me, bitch. Where's the correction?
Right there.
Time to make a wish. But
what are you gonna wish
like
for?
like FBI agents and CIA agents and all that are trained to be able to pass those tests.
Exactly.
Even if they're lying.
Now, so
pinch of salt, I don't know if that's 100% true, but it makes sense if you're an agent, you need to be able to lie.
If you're a spy.
You know, if you're like, deep cover.
So, basically, during the polygraph testicular. So, during the polygraph test, they asked him if he knows where the kids are. And there was a fluctuation that led to him failing the test. And as I said, like, this man, 2 of his children were missing. 1 of his children had been murdered, and his ex-wife had been murdered. The stress and grief that this man was no doubt dealing with. Obviously, he was going to fail the polygraph test.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was going to fail a polygraph. Yeah. But in any case, police were able to use computer forensics to determine that Steve was in fact at home the night of the murders, and he was cleared of suspicion. Investigators had, of course, at this point issued an Amber Alert, and thousands of tips...
I would fucking hope.
I don't know why I have this written in present tense. But anyway. So investigators had, of course, issued an Amber Alert, and thousands of tips started rolling in, but nothing was making sense. The police weren't sure that this could be a random attack because nothing was stolen from the house, and the level of violence led them to believe it was a crime of passion. Meanwhile, Duncan, who went by the name Jet, I don't think I've mentioned that yet, my apologies.
Duncan,
Jet, James, Joseph. Where am I pulling James from? Who the fuck is James?
The TikTok a while ago before we started recording. That was one of the names.
But this was even before that.
I don't know, so.
I still find it weird that my name was involved in that, but whatever. So meanwhile...
Jet.
Where am I? Oh yeah, Duncan, who went by the name Jet, had taken Shasta and Dylan to a remote campsite almost 100 miles away outside St. Regis, Montana, in the Lolo National Forest. Once there, he told... Sorry. I'm having brain malfunctions. He told the 2 children what he had done to their family. Grabbing the hammer he had used, he said to them, quote, "See this hammer? This is the hammer that I murdered your mom and your stepdad and your brother with. They're not alive and you're never going to see them again."
Well, that was lovely.
Lovely. Charming. Absolutely charming. He kept them as his captives for 7 weeks and would, of course, sexually assault and molest them. Shasta would later say of Duncan, quote, "He got really mad, started throwing things. He took more of his anger out on Dylan and was really mean to me. He would abuse him and make me watch. And then if I cried, then he would abuse him worse." So just a real fucking
Yeah, because I was actually kind of wondering, I was like, when he kidnapped a girl, because everything he's mentioned so far has been a boy victim. So I was wondering where that was going.
I don't think he had a preference. I think during his teens it was mostly boys.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, and like I will say, I couldn't find the court transcripts, but I know a lot of the court transcripts were redacted.
Probably and so many minors.
Yeah, there isn't really a lot of information out there to do with the specifics of what happened, and to be honest, even if there was, I wouldn't be looking into that. You don't want to
put too much in, yeah.
I wouldn't be looking into that. So it is very general. So Duncan would also play sick mind games with the children. On one occasion, he told them that they would be allowed to go back home as long as they did what he asked, and made them write letters to their family.
Go home to what? And he's already told them the family's dead.
Yeah.
So what's he letting them write letters to?
To their dad.
Oh yeah, sorry, forgot about him.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dad.
Sorry, Steve. So one letter read, "Dear Dad, I miss you very much, and me and Dylan know what happened to Mom, Mark and Slade, and we both feel very sorry for them, and we both miss you and Jesse and Vance, and we might see you guys again." This gave Shasta and Dylan a sense of hope that they would be able to go home soon, but it was just another one of Duncan's twisted tricks.
I'm assuming he wasn't even posting them.
He never sent the letters.
Yeah.
That was literally my next line. He never sent the letters. It was just his cruel way of manipulating them to be complacent.
Because I'm like, if he wanted to be extra cruel, he could have sent the letters in terms of to like, you know, rub salt in the wounds of the dad and the other siblings.
In his mind,
that could be backtracked to him.
Yeah, in his mind, this was the perfect crime and he was not going to get caught.
It's just standard with the majority of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
They all think they're the bee's fucking knees.
Yeah, and really all you are is fucking
bees
scumbags!
Don't have knees!
Scumbags. Anyway, Shasta says that after a certain amount of time... Yeah, because scumbags.
I know.
Shasta says that after a certain amount of time, Dylan had begun to lose hope that things would turn out good for him. Meanwhile, police learned that the day before the murders and kidnapping, there had been a barbecue at the house, and they found a fingerprint on the door, which matched to a man named Robert Lutner. He had a criminal record and allegedly owed money to Brenda and Mark. To police, this was a possible motive, but they couldn't find Lutner anywhere, and his parole officer said that he left town shortly after the murders, which only added to the suspicion. However, when Lutner got in contact with his parole officer and was informed that police wanted to speak with him, he immediately came back to Coeur d'Alene on his own. He was questioned extensively by police and he passed a polygraph, so police ruled him out as a suspect. They loved a fucking polygraph test back then.
Who got ruled out with the polygraph?
Robert Lutner. Like, he was just a suspect that I
general
mentioned.
suspect.
Yeah. Back at the campsite, Shasta sees that Dylan is starting to lose hope, and she feels that she needs to stay strong to give him the courage to go on. She tells him, quote, "I promise that we're going to make it out alive." The two supported each other through their horrific ordeal, but things only got worse when Duncan began to force drugs and alcohol on them. And when he believed that they were both wasted, he would begin to tell them horrible stories of things that he had done to other children. But Shasta, who, by the way, I want to reiterate, was 8 years old.
And this is a lot of trauma in a very short space of time.
Extremely clever.
Not that it's any less trauma in a long period of time, but anyway.
Was so switched on, so clever. She took everything in. Everything that he was saying, she took it in. She tried to keep as much of it in her head as she could. And she later spoke of one story he told, saying, quote, "He very vividly and in detail described murders of 2 sisters from Seattle, Sammiejo White and Carmen.
The case that was
He would tell us the way he had done it, where he had placed their bodies. When he had started telling us about the murders, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to pretend like I'm drinking this. Like, this little 8-year-old girl manipulated the fuck out of this grown psychopath, and I'm just like, you badass, you little badass.
Yeah.
It's at this point that Shasta starts to formulate a plan. She knows that Duncan feels some kind of connection to her, and she decides that she is going to use that against him. She begins asking questions about his life and his family, and if she can meet them one day. She had made a conscious choice to make him believe that she loved him and she wanted to be there with him. And at first this works. Duncan starts to be a little bit nicer to Shasta and Dylan. But 1 month into their captivity, he tells the children that if they could catch a squirrel that was persistently coming back to the campsite, he would let them go. Dylan was able to catch the squirrel, and he and Shasta had a brand new sense of hope that they would finally be able to go home to their father and their 2 older brothers. They think that Duncan is having them pack up to go home. Shasta had just given Dylan a hug and was holding his hand when she heard a loud bang.
No.
She felt his hand slip from hers.
Fuck.
Duncan had shot him twice. He then cried and told Shasta that it had been an accident, but Shasta was smart and she knew you don't accidentally shoot someone twice. According to Duncan, he had shot him the second time so that he wouldn't feel pain. He then made Shasta help him move Dylan's body onto a tarp where he burned it. Now Shasta had lost her lifeline. She had lost...
It was just her now.
It was just her and Duncan. And honestly, I don't know how this little girl kept up the hope that she would survive and that she would be able to go home to her dad and her brothers and her surviving family. After 6 weeks, Duncan moved Shasta to another campsite in a lower point on the mountain where he chained her up in a tent.
That's 6 weeks from the beginning, is it?
Yeah. She recalls seeing people pass by, but she was so terrified of Duncan and what he would do and what he could do that she never called out to them or asked for help. One night, he gives Shasta a choice. He tells her that she has the choice to be strangled or to be shot like your brother, and that one is going to be quicker.
Well...
Shasta felt like if she chose strangulation, she would have more chance of talking him out of it.
That's true.
She says that as he strangled her, she saw visions of her family and that this gave her the strength to carry on. She mustered up enough breath to say, "Please don't, Jet." And this worked. Duncan began to cry and said he couldn't do it. Shasta continued to play on his emotional connection to her, and any time he would bring up her going home, she would tell him that she wanted to stay with him, even though she wanted nothing more than to go home.
But it would have only angered him if, even though he was saying it,
she needed him to believe that she genuinely wanted to be there with him. On July 2nd, 2005, 7 weeks after killing her family and abducting her, Duncan sat Shasta down and asked her if she would be his daughter and stay with him and call him Dad. He told her he wanted to take her to meet his mother, and Shasta agreed to all of this. Shasta asks him to take her to where she grew up, telling him that she wants to show him where she went to school, where her best friend lives, and other places that are important to her because he is important to her. And he says yes. On the way back to Coeur d'Alene, they stop at a convenience store, but the tip doesn't roll into police until after the manager reviews security footage after Shasta and Duncan left the store. Duncan asks Shasta if she's hungry, and knowing that he would likely take her somewhere public, Shasta says yes, and they go to a Denny's. Shasta can see her missing persons poster on the way in the door. A man makes eye contact with her and nods his head, to which she nods back. This man then goes up to the counter and Shasta watches as he speaks to a waitress who then looks over at her. The waitress, Amber Dean, then speaks to her manager and calls the police.
Boom.
Now, I tried getting a clip of the 911 call, but I couldn't find one anywhere. But in the video that I watched earlier today, I have it linked in my resources, the waitress basically said that she could sense that something was wrong. She could see how much power Duncan had over Shasta, and she could see how much Shasta looked like the missing person poster. And she said
because to be fair, she's only been missing for 7 weeks at this point.
It's not
so
like
she's not going to have to change a lot.
It's not like
she
Madeleine
might have
McCann,
changed in the sense
where
that
she would look so much older now.
Yeah, it's like she might have changed in the sense that she might be like run down looking or things like that, but you're not going to look like a completely different person usually in the space of 7 weeks. Sometimes people do. Yeah. But I don't think she would have looked unrecognisable after 7 weeks.
Exactly. And Amber spoke to her manager and said straight out to her manager, "I think that's Shasta Groene. If I'm wrong, I'll pay for their meal." So she rang 911 and she said basically that she worked at Denny's and we've got a little girl here and she looks a lot like that Shasta, the missing girl. She said, and I don't know, but, you know, it's worth...
Yeah, she fits the description and she looks like the photo.
So Duncan was ready to leave the Denny's before the police got there. So Amber, the waitress, pretended to have trouble printing the check to keep him in his seat longer, and other patrons, like other people, had noticed Shasta as well.
Yeah, because obviously there's a poster in that diner as well. Like,
they began to position themselves in strategic ways that they could stop him from leaving if they needed to.
But make it look like it was kind of like,
Not
oh sorry, bump into him. And
like these people were really like, some of them were certain that it was Shasta, but whether they were certain or not, they weren't going to risk him getting away with her if it was her.
Yeah.
And like, just the amount of respect that I have for these people.
And for her to be so smart that whole time,
God, this little,
regardless of everything that was happening.
I'm in
at
awe.
That age,
I am in awe of this child. Like, obviously, it's a fucking terrible situation. It's horrible that she had to go through it, and it's horrible that she had to deal with so much, but she was so strong.
Yeah.
For a child. I don't think I could have been that strong. I'm fucking 25.
Yeah, but like even to be that, like, you know, that smart and
so clever, so
clear-minded about it.
To know, to manipulate
some
this
people even
connection.
like I feel like even people like, you know, older people who've been abducted wouldn't even be able to do it sometimes.
And like it is common advice that's given, but like I don't think it's advice that she specifically would have been given before kidnapping. Is to try and connect with your kidnapper.
Yeah.
So. Finally, the police arrived and asked for Shasta's name, and as soon as she confirmed that she was in fact Shasta Groene, the police arrested Duncan, and Shasta was finally able to be returned to her father and her brothers, and she was finally free. Now, Duncan, who was a fugitive after skipping bail on a 2004 charge of molestation in Minnesota, had his car searched, and police uncovered a shotgun, video equipment, and recordings of Dylan and Shasta while he was holding them captive. Duncan immediately stonewalled and refused to speak to police, but Shasta had more than enough information collected in her head.
Yeah.
One investigator said of Shasta's statement, quote, "The thought of an 8-year-old girl having to observe this and then having to relive it after the fact is just amazing to me. She witnessed things that grown people would be traumatized for the rest of their lives and never be able to speak about." And Shasta was even able to give information that Duncan had told her about other crimes and murders.
Like the one you mentioned at the very start.
Yeah. So Duncan would eventually confess to police and told them that he would hunt for his targets and use a GPS to mark houses with children, which is what he had done with Shasta's house after seeing her and Dylan playing in the yard. He had studied the house for a few days, the house and the family for days before striking, and he had even befriended their pit bull using treats so that the dog wouldn't alert to him when he entered the home. And he also did confess to the murder of Sammiejo White and Carmen Cubias.
In Seattle.
Now, he was never charged with this.
Probably fucking statute of limitations bullshit, I'm assuming.
But at trial, the jury had to watch footage that Duncan had recorded of the abuse he had inflicted on Shasta and Dylan, which is just awful. And on October 16th, 2006, Duncan pleaded guilty to 3 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Brenda, Mark and Slade, for which he received 3 life sentences. He was later charged with and pled guilty to 10 additional federal charges in relation to the kidnappings and sexual assaults of Dylan and Shasta, as well as Dylan's murder, and he was sentenced to death. When handing down his sentence, Judge David Downing said, quote, "In 31 years of being involved in the criminal justice system...
That's what came into my head there as well.
I have never met a more evil person than Joseph Duncan." Duncan was sent to federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he remained on death row until he died of brain cancer on March 28th,
So many people that end up on death row die of sort of cancer or aneurysm before their death date.
It's the badness coming out of them. It's the justice. It's karma. Karma's saying, it's taking too long. So Shasta had some troubles in life after her ordeal with Duncan. Understandably. She had some issues with drugs in her teens. And I know I watched an interview. I don't think I have it linked because I didn't take any information from it specifically. But I watched an interview with her where she said basically this one judge, she was caught for drug offences, I think. And this one judge looked at her history and said, basically you can do better in life, and sent her to, I think it was a treatment facility. And then when it was time for her to come out...
Yeah, like not punishing, more so helping.
When it was time for her to come out, I think that same judge said, I'm not sending you back to Coeur d'Alene. Basically told her, I think it's just going to bring you back to where you were. It's just going to cause more issues for you. So she...
You need a fresh start, like.
Moved somewhere else, had a fresh start. She's now a mother of 5. And as far as I know, she's leading a normal life. And from interviews that I've seen, she appears to be well adjusted and happy. And I truly hope that this woman has an absolutely amazing...
life.
Blessed life. Because...
to be through that before you're even 9.
Yeah. To lose... over half your family.
Yeah.
And like, she was holding Dylan's hand when he was murdered. Accidentally.
Fuck off.
So that is the case of the murders of Sammiejo White and Carmen Cubias, and the kidnappings and murder of Shasta Groene. Well, Shasta wasn't murdered, but murder of Dylan, Slade, Brenda and Mark Mackenzie. And the shit show of a human being that is Joseph Edward Duncan III.
So that was something.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that's awful. Like, but like at least I'm assuming that the parent was still alive.
Steve.
Of the first 2 girls in Seattle.
I believe so.
So at least she would have got answers. Like, I know obviously they found the bodies 2 years after, but they just didn't know.
Yeah.
So at least, obviously, it's fucking ridiculous, because technically there wouldn't have necessarily been justice specifically for those 2, because no charges were done in relation to that. But at least that person ended up on death row for a separate thing, and the truth came out that it was them.
And they got some bit of closure,
yeah. Oh, that's sad.
It is roasting today.
Yeah.
My knees are sweating.
It's just because we're sitting in the direct sunlight in the car.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm menopausal.
I'm starving.
Oh. But anyway.
Yeah, so that's that. Back with a bang, lads.
So, yeah, I was going to say something, but I can't remember what I was going to say, because I genuinely think I'm about to get heat stroke. But, so thanks for listening, guys. And
it's good to be back.
We'll talk to you soon. Well, you'll listen to us soon. Apologies for the loudness of the word scumbag throughout the case. So, ciao for now, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.